let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever wondered how the world actually polices dirty money? When we think of international finance, we usually picture these massive trading floors or digital transfers happening in the literal blink of an eye. But behind all of that, there's this incredibly complex, high-stakes system designed to keep illicit money completely out of the global economy. So today, we're unpacking a really fascinating document. It's the official assessment methodology used to evaluate exactly how well countries are pulling this off. Think of it as the ultimate global report card.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, protecting global finance. Then, the two-part assessment. Next up, understanding risk and context, followed by materiality and sector weighting, and finally, the final evaluation.
All right, Section 1, Protecting Global Finance and the Specific Mission of the FATF.
So who exactly is handing out these global report cards? It's the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF for short. They are an independent intergovernmental body, and they basically set the global standards for financial security. Think of them as the lead architects. They write the rules that countries all over the world absolutely must follow to ensure their financial systems aren't just wide open to criminals. When the FATF releases an assessment methodology, it's really not just a list of polite suggestions. It is the definitive global standard.
Now, you're going to see a lot of alphabet soup in this space, so let's clear up these acronyms right off the bat. This whole methodology is about building a framework to stop three things: ML, which is money laundering, TF, terrorist financing, and PF, which stands for proliferation financing, specifically the financing of weapons of mass destruction. That last one is incredibly specific, but as you can imagine, absolutely vital. The FATF's entire mission revolves around safeguarding the global financial system from these three distinct but very deeply connected threats.
Moving to Section 2, the two-part assessment, and exactly how these countries are tested.
The FATF methodology essentially boils down to a two-part test. First up is technical compliance. This asks, does the country actually have the right laws, regulations, and institutions on the books? But look, as we all know, just having a rule doesn't mean anyone is actually following it, right? And that is exactly why effectiveness is the critical second half of the test. Are those laws actually getting results in the real world? It's kind of like technical compliance is having the blueprints for a house, while effectiveness is proving that the house actually keeps the rain out. A country absolutely needs both to pass.
And guys, this isn't just some academic theory. Right now, the FATF is in its fifth round of global mutual evaluations, which kicked off in 2024, and they're using this exact, newly updated methodology that runs through December 2025. That means, as we speak, legal and financial experts are flying around the globe using this very framework to meticulously audit national financial systems. But here's the catch. Not every country takes the exact same test. A massive global financial hub is dealing with totally different threats than a small developing nation.
Which brings us to Section 3, understanding risk and context. Basically, grading on a curve.
Assessors don't just look at a country's banking laws in a vacuum. They look at the foundation the whole system is built on. It's like how a student really needs a quiet room and a desk to study effectively. An effective financial system requires core structural elements to function. Does the country have political stability? Is there a high-level commitment to fighting financial crime? Do they have stable institutions, a strong rule of law, and a capable judicial system? Because without those basic building blocks, even the best laws on paper are going to fail in practice.
But there's a really crucial nuance here. The FATF is super clear about this. An unfavorable context, like missing those structural elements we just talked about, is absolutely never an excuse for dropping the ball on implementation. They grade on a universal standard. They'll acknowledge if a country is facing tough circumstances, for sure, but they will not lower the passing grade just because the test is harder for some. No excuses.
So, how do they actually pinpoint a specific country's risks? Assessors follow a pretty strict four-step process. First, they review the country's own self-assessment. Second, they do their own scoping exercise to flag high-risk areas, like, say, a booming, unregulated real estate market. Third, they consult credible third-party sources. They don't just take the country's word for it, they actually double-check the data. And finally, they sit down and try to reach a common understanding with national authorities. This guarantees the evaluation is hyper-focused on the areas posing the biggest real-world threat.
All right, Section 4, materiality and sector weighting. Let's look at the specific subjects on this exam.
So who's actually taking this test? It breaks down into three main groups.
First, your traditional financial institutions, banks, insurance, securities. Second are DNFBPs, or designated non-financial businesses and professions. Think casinos, real estate agents, lawyers, professions that move massive amounts of money and are huge targets for money laundering. And third, VASPs, virtual asset service providers. Yes, the crypto exchanges and digital wallets. The FATF rules apply strictly to all three of these slices.
When assessors evaluate these groups, there's a really important distinction to understand in the methodology. Anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing, AML and CFT, require very broad, sweeping risk-based measures across the board. But PF, proliferation financing, is handled differently. The rules for stopping the funding of weapons of mass destruction are highly targeted. They focus strictly on enforcing specific financial sanctions rather than just requiring massive, sweeping, systemic risk assessments from everyone.
And here is how the grading actually works in practice. Countries are not graded equally on every single sector. Assessors weight these areas based on their materiality. A massive, deeply integrated financial sector is obviously going to carry much more weight on the final report card than a small, isolated one. They look at product types, cross-border business, and even the size of a country's shadow economy. If a country has flawless traditional banking, but they've got this massive, totally unregulated crypto market, that heavy crypto weight is going to drag their overall score way, way down.
Now, a quick note on the rules themselves. The FATF is incredibly strict about what actually counts as a rule. Voluntary industry guidelines or non-binding best practices? Sure, they're nice to have, and they might give a little boost to a country's effectiveness score. But actual technical compliance strictly requires concrete laws and enforceable mechanisms. Basically, if a rule isn't legally binding, as far as technical compliance goes, it literally doesn't exist. Finally, Section 5. The final evaluation, making the grade. A huge piece of this final evaluation comes down to what happens when things go wrong. When institutions fail the test, the FATF demands that countries have a real system of sanctions. But it's a delicate balancing act. On one hand, penalties must be proportionate. The punishment has to fit the crime. But on the other hand, they absolutely must be dissuasive. A tiny little fine for a multi-billion-dollar bank, yeah, not going to cut it. The penalties have to be severe enough to genuinely scare off anyone else who might be tempted to cut corners. Assessors want to see these used in practice, not just sitting on a shelf. So, why should we care about all of this? I know it's super easy to get bogged down in the acronyms, FAFT, AML, VASPs, but at the end of the day, this dense, complicated international methodology is the literal shield stopping the bank right down your street from accidentally moving money for global syndicates. It forces nations to step up, ensuring the financial systems we use every single day aren't secretly funding human trafficking, terrorism, or the illegal drug trade.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really think about. As crypto, decentralized finance, and virtual assets continue to evolve at lightning speed, the FATF is constantly racing to update this methodology. But can these global report cards ever truly keep up? Is our ability to pass new laws just destined to always remain one step behind the innovative tools of modern criminals, or can true on-the-ground effectiveness actually stay ahead of the curve? Thanks for joining me, and I hope this gives you a whole new perspective the next time you hear about international financial regulation.